Hi lovelies, welcome or welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name's Maria and today's video is going to be my May reading wrap up. So just going through all the books I read in May, giving you my thoughts and feelings, whether I recommend them, and just kind of my overall feeling of my reading month. And last month I actually had a really good month. I think it's the first month this year where I've actually read all of my TBR, or at least attempted to read them. There was one that I did soft DNF just because I wasn't in the mood for it at that time, but I know if I had been in the mood for it, I could have finished it. So I'm taking that as a win. I did attempt to read it. I just wasn't in the mood for it at that time. But the rest of the books that were on my TBR, I did actually manage to get to them, so pretty happy about that. Looking at kind of my average rating for the month as well, it was 4.07, so pretty good reading month. There was one or two kind of lower rated books in there, but for the most part, most of my reads were around that 4-star rating, so a couple of 5 stars in there as well. So again, even though I did read 14 books, most of them were pretty good and kind of held up that quality that I'm looking for. So yeah, I think overall a really good month. So the first book I read in May was actually completing a series, and it was The Atlas Complex by Elliot Brooks. So this is the third book in the Atlas 6 series, so there's 3 books in that series, and I read the first 2 books pretty much as soon as they came out. Really enjoyed them, actually reread them last year with the intention of reading this third book as soon as it came out, but for whatever reason just didn't end up getting to it last year. And then I got really hesitant to actually pick it up because the reviews for it weren't really that great, and unfortunately for me, I did kind of see why a lot of people were rating this a bit more lowly than the rest of the series, and it definitely didn't kind of meet my expectations when it came to the series finale. But before I get into all of that, if you haven't heard of the Atlas 6 series, it's essentially a bit of a dark academia series, has a bit of magical realism in there, and it's centering around this kind of university type of place called the Alexandrian Society, whereby 6 people are basically chosen to come and join this society, but only 5 people can actually be enrolled. So they're basically competing for a year to try and get a place within this society, and the story goes from there. It really is an exploration of the people that we're following, the characters that we're following, their personalities, and kind of what it would mean if you gave 6 people kind of infinite power and control over certain things. And I really enjoyed the first book. The first book was definitely a 5-star for me. Second book was a little bit slow, but we do expect middle books to have a bit more filler in there, but I still really enjoyed the narrative. But when it came to the third book, I think we're continuing to kind of explore the tangled relationships that these people end up having, but it did become a little bit repetitive. It did become a little bit more preachy in its tone, because we are obviously thinking about a lot of philosophical dilemmas and things like that, and we had kind of covered that ground within the first 2 books, and it definitely wasn't what I was expecting considering the explosive ending to the second book as well. And I think the pacing really struggled in this one in terms of it was quite uneven. There were some times where there was immense action and you were expecting that to carry on, and then it would just slow right down again, and it just made it feel a little bit patchy for me. But I do think that this series overall is definitely one for anyone who likes character driven stories, anyone who really likes to explore character dynamics and relationships, because that really is the focus for this. I think a lot of fantasy readers go into this kind of thinking they're going to get that fantasy fix, and for me personally it's definitely more magical realism. And in the second and third books it is there, you know, it's a very science driven magic within this, a lot of physics and things like that, so it's probably not what most people are expecting when they think of fantasy. So I really think if you're going to dive into this one, you need to be someone who's really character driven and not necessarily looking for a specific plot, because a lot of it is vibes over plot with this one. So ended up rating this one 3.25. I did enjoy it for the writing. I love Olivia Blake's writing, but in terms of the payoff for the series, it was definitely a bit of a disappointing end for that series and just wasn't what I was expecting from it. So yeah, a little bit disappointed, but still a pretty solid book. So the next book I read in May was The Hurricane Wars by Thea Guanzon, and this is one that's been on my TBR essentially since it came out, because I did get this Furry edition as soon as it came out and seen so many people raving about it, saying it was the next new big romantasy, and if you were a romantasy reader you needed to pick this up. And even though I did have that on one side, I then also did see a lot of people saying that this was absolutely terrible and they really hated it, so I was pretty hesitant to pick this up. I'd had a bit of a bad run of luck when it came to romantasies, so I kind of been putting this one off. But a lot of friends who I have who usually like the same type of books told me that this was really good and they thought I would really like it, so decided to pick this one up, and I'm really glad I did, because I did actually end up really enjoying this. So in this one we've got 2 characters, Taliesin and Alaric, who are leaders of 2 kind of warring parts of this world. There is a bit of a Star Wars fanfic element to this. I've never watched Star Wars, so I didn't pick up any of that, but if you're an avid Star Wars fan you may kind of recognize some of the themes in here and some of the storytelling that's in here that kind of resonates with that. But for me personally, because I don't know the story, I didn't really pick up on whether it's a good one or a bad one, so I can't comment on that. But essentially we've got these 2 characters who are leading kind of warring factions of this world, and it's decided that they need to come to peace, and a way that they're going to do that is having a arranged marriage between them 2. So we've got the forced proximity, marriage of convenience, and the story kind of goes from there. And I think with this one I really enjoyed it because the enemies to lovers aspect was really well done. I think there was a lot of tension in there. They were true true enemies within this story. They weren't just rivals or just didn't like each other because of a small spat. They were true enemies, so it really added to that angst and tension. And this is definitely a slow burn, I would say, because even I have read the second book now, but even within this first book, you don't really get that progression within the relationship, which is what I like, especially when it is an enemies to lovers story. You don't want that 180, or personally, I don't like that 180 when they just kind of abandon everything they believe in to become lovers. There's definitely some yearning and angst in here, but they're definitely conflicted about it, and you can kind of see in their inner monologues that they're fighting against it because of their beliefs and because of their core beliefs. The world building for me did feel quite unique, but as I say, this is technically a Star Wars fanfic, so it might not be as unique as I felt it was because I don't have that reference, but for me it felt really fresh, felt quite unique, and I really liked the way it was done. But I would say that the first 30% did drag a little bit because of that world building. There was quite a little bit of info dumping at the start, and I wasn't really sure if I was going to continue with it, but really glad I ended up listening to this on audio because it did help me get through that first 30%. The last 70% was definitely a lot more engaging for me and definitely caught my attention. So I definitely think if you're a fan of romantasy, if you're a fan of enemies to lovers, kind of star-crossed tension with some really beautiful writing, you should definitely pick this one up because I was definitely pleasantly surprised with this one. And as I say, I've read the second book and really enjoyed that too, but you'll get more on that in next month's wrap up. But yeah, overall really enjoyed it, so ended up giving this one 4 stars. So next up I read We Free the Stars by Hafsa Faisal, and again this is finishing out a series, so I believe this is called The Sands of Urwaya Geology. Not too sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but starts with We Hunt the Flame, and in this story we're following 2 characters in a land where magic has basically disappeared, and the first character is a huntress who has to disguise herself as a man, as women are not supposed to hunt in this world. And then we also have Nasir, who is the Prince of Death, and he is sent on a mission to essentially try and restore magic to this land. And along the way he ends up coming across the huntress who has also embarked on this mission to try and restore magic to her land to help the people of her town. And their stories end up getting embroiled with different political factions, a lot of familial histories, and it's really just tip of the iceberg with this story, but that's kind of the main premise of it. And I read We Hunt the Flame probably last summer, so really wanted to finish this geology out because I really loved the writing style in the first one. I just really wanted to see where the story went because it did end on quite a cliffhanger. And I think this series is definitely a firm 4-star series for me. I really liked this conclusion to the series. I think the stakes were higher, their emotions were higher, there was a lot more tensions within this one. The little bit of romance that we had in here was really satisfying as well. If you really like angst and tension in your romance, you'll definitely like the romance that is in here. I really love the writing style, as I say, and the world building in the second one really did expand in really interesting ways. And the only thing that kind of stopped this from being a 5-star series is there are definitely times where the pacing felt a little bit slower and it felt like it dragged a little bit. And there were definitely a few scenes that I think probably could have been cut, then we didn't need it in here. These are pretty chunky books and some parts of it did feel like it dragged a little bit, but other than that, really enjoyed this. Really loved all the side characters. There's a lot of found family in here, obviously real family as well. But yeah, I think if you really love kind of immersive, really atmospheric settings and beautiful kind of lyrical writing as well, I think you'll really enjoy this geology. And it does have a different type of kind of magic system that we're maybe seeing in more mainstream, because I believe this kind of goes back to maybe Islamic / maybe Persian folklore mythology. I'm not exactly sure where it's from in terms of region, but you've got a lot of jinn in here and things like that. So if you're looking for something a little bit different that's a bit more atmospheric and has a lot of folklore kind of woven into the storyline, definitely pick this one up because I really enjoyed it and really excited to read more from Hafsa Faisal. I do have her book The Tempest of Tea, or A Tempest of Tea, on my TBR, so be really excited to pick that one up now that I finished this geology. But yeah, overall highly recommend this one, and as I say, ended up rating this one 4-star. So next up I read something that's a little bit out of my comfort zone and definitely different than what I usually read, but it's There Were Rivers in the Sky by Elif Shafak, and this is a bit more of a historical fiction and it's following 3 different timelines. So one from Victorian London, one from 2014 in Turkey, and then another one from 2018 in modern day London. And we're basically just following 3 characters along their lives and kind of understanding where they are, but along the way their stories do converge and you kind of see how they're intertwined with each other. And I think the main thing I really loved about this was the writing style. It was absolutely beautiful, really moving, and even though we don't spend a lot of time with the characters because obviously the book is split into 3 essentially, so a third of the book is spent with each character, the author really made me connect with them all in a very deep way. I really cared about them. I really wanted to see what happened and was really invested in their stories as well. And I think definitely by the end of this one, it's an emotional gut punch and you definitely will feel for the characters within this story. As I was saying, the writing style is really beautiful, but what kind of lurks underneath there is very dark and very difficult truths that we kind of have to face as human beings, and especially others in other parts of the world, maybe more than ourselves. And some of that was extremely difficult to read, and I would say to check out some trigger warnings for this book because there is quite a lot that is explored within here. I think it's all very important and all very meaningful to read it, but definitely just check those trigger warnings warnings because some of it was pretty horrific to read through, but as I say, it really was kind of encapsulated in this really beautiful story with really beautiful writing style, and it's really made me intrigued to see what else this author has written. I have another one of her books on my TBR as well, so we'll definitely be intrigued to pick that one up, but really glad I ended up branching out of my kind of comfort zone and picking this one up because, as I say, the writing was absolutely beautiful and it's definitely made me think that I may enjoy books like this a little bit more than I had thought I would before. I was kind of intrigued by the beautiful writing style with this one initially, but in terms of the story, I did really enjoy it as well, so it's definitely made me kind of look at the books I'm picking up and books I may be interested in a slightly different light, so definitely thankful for that. But overall gave this one 4.25. Really enjoyed it, and yeah, excited to see more from this author. Next up, I read Never Lie by Frida McFadden, and this is actually my first Frida McFadden book. It was for my In Real Life book club, and I was actually really excited to pick this up because I've heard great things about her thrillers, great things about her writing, so even though I'm not really a thriller reader, I was really excited to pick this up to give it a try. And first thing I'll say is I do think it was fun. It was definitely entertaining while I was reading it, but it was a little bit predictable. I don't know if this is the best Frida McFadden to start on, but for me personally it was just a little bit predictable, so it did kind of take away from my enjoyment a little bit. But in this one we're following a couple who basically turn up to this house to view it because they want to purchase it, and essentially there's a snowstorm and they end up having to stay there, and weird things start happening within this house and the story goes from there. So yeah, I did enjoy it while I was reading it. It's definitely not a book I think I'll be thinking about anytime kind of in the future or anything, but for the time of reading it I did find it quite entertaining. I thought the writing style was pretty good, and as I say, even though it was a little bit predictable, it was still a fun read. So not my usual genre, but I would definitely look into some of her other books because I enjoyed my time enough while reading it, and if I ever need kind of a quick read to get me out of a slump or something like that, I think her books would be the perfect books to do that because it was quite fast paced. I read it pretty quickly, and yeah, as I say, pretty much enjoyed it while I was reading it, so rated a 3.5. Pretty solid read, but probably not the most memorable read for me. So next up I read an indie romantasy, and this is Rain and Ruin by J.D. Evans, and this was actually recommended to me in my Booktubers Pick My Reads video by Elliot Brooks on here, so EB Novels. I'm sure you've heard of her, but she basically recommended this book because she's not the biggest romantasy reader, but she read this one and enjoyed it, and because I do like romantasy, she thought this might be one that I enjoy, and I definitely did enjoy this one. In this one we're following Niamey, who is the heir to the Sultanate within this land, and essentially he's not doing very well. He's kind of suffering from dementia, and she's doing all she can to kind of hold on to his reign so that she can take over from him, and so that it doesn't get into the hands of some of the corrupt court members that she's currently dealing with. And usually she would have to marry someone to be able to become the new Sultanate for this land. She's trying to change the laws around this so that she can actually rule herself without having to marry. Obviously there's a load of court intrigue within that in itself, but there is also a lot of political machinations going on when it comes to some other parts of this world, as essentially there is magic in this land, but it has been dying for quite some time, and a lot of the reason for that is because there are basically 6 spokes of the wheel, and each of those have a magic assigned to them, and one of those was basically eradicated from this world because of fear, but it has had that knock-on effect of everybody else's magic is getting weaker, and Niamey is actually looking for a way to try and remedy that as well. In comes Sarkum, who is the brother to the heir of a neighbouring kingdom, and he happens to have the magic that had been eradicated from Niamey's land, and the story kind of goes from there. They reluctantly ally together to try and save the magic of the land and also secure her place as the leader of her kingdom. And I think what I really liked about this one was firstly the kind of intriguing court politics, all of the political machinations. It had a really interesting magic system. It wasn't anything kind of too unique. It did have a lot of elemental references in there, but just the way that it was set up in terms of the structure of it, as I say, around this kind of spokes of the wheel that they had and that balance that they need for it, was really interesting to me. And I did really enjoy the romance in here. I do think that it was pretty slow burn. You know, there was a little bit of a 180 moment within there, but it was later within the book, so I can forgive that. And especially because I read this thinking there was going to be more books following these characters, but this series is actually interconnected standalone, so the next book follows a different couple. So that switch kind of made a bit more sense to me, knowing that that was going to be the structure of the series, because their story kind of had to end in this book, or at least it had to be completed, essentially. So it made a lot more sense once I understood that. I do think, however, there were some parts of this that dragged a little bit for me. Some of it was overly detail that we didn't actually see as relevant as the book went on, and it just meant that some of the pacing was a little bit uneven for me, and I really thought there would be more urgency and tension in some parts of the plot where it was kind of lacking, so kind of took me out of the story a little bit. But I do think overall this was a really strong debut to a series. I really liked the writing style, and I'm definitely intrigued to read on in the series as well. But yeah, I think it's a really strong debut. I am still intrigued in the rest of the series. I ended up giving this book in particular 3.75, which is a really strong contender for a new series, especially the start of a new series. So really glad that Elliot ended up recommending this to me, and really glad I read it. And yeah, I'll be really excited to read on in the series of this one. And in that video, Elliot did also recommend God Killer by Hannah Kaner to me as well. And this had been on my TBR for such a long time, so I was really glad to have a reason to kind of motivate me to pick this one up. And this one I actually ended up really loving. It kind of had a very cozy feel, even though it was quite dark in places as well. So it was almost like cozy fantasy with a bit of a dark undertone in there. We're following our main character, Kissing, who as a child her family were killed by gods. And in this land, gods are actually forbidden, but they do still kind of secretly wander the land trying to gain worship from their followers. Kissing has actually ended up being a god killer because of that, trying to kind of avenge her family. That is until she meets a god that she can't kill because he's actually bonded to a little girl, and they end up kind of allying together to travel to the lost realm of the gods to try and aid her. And along the way they meet a ragtag group of people that also reluctantly ally with them, and the story goes from there. But I just really love this one, really enjoyed, as I say, the kind of found family aspects within here. The world that we're in is definitely really gritty, but as I said, it just weirdly had this cozy vibe about it, even though the world was quite dark and there were a lot of dark things happening there. It just had this cozy feel about it, which I really loved. And I just feel like the world building was so immersive. You could definitely feel the danger and the tension there, and I could really envisage every kind of scene that we were in. I really loved our main character, Kissing. She's not your kind of usual heroine. She's quite sharp, she's quite witty, very sharp tongued, kind of rough around the edges as well, and I really ended up caring about her. But what really surprised me was how much I cared about the side characters as well. This is a pretty short book. I think it's like 300 pages or something like that, but Hannah Kaner was able to get me to really care about these characters and be invested in them in such a short amount of time. So really loved this. Again, I do want to continue the series on this one. I actually have the second book on my TBR this month, hoping to pick that up and continue the series, because again, this one ended on a cliffhanger and I want to see what happens. So ended up rating this one 4 stars as well, and again, thank you to Elliot for convincing me to pick this one up, because it was definitely a real favourite this month. In that same video, I did also have Ellen Catherine from BookTube pick me a book as well. So the book that she recommended was First Time Caller by BK Borison. She's definitely a big romance reader, so I'm always looking at her for recommendations when it comes to romance. I'm sure you've seen her on here, but just in case you haven't, I will link hers and Elliot's YouTube's in the description below. But as I say, she recommended First Time Caller. This is quite a new release. I think it was released in March, maybe April, but it was definitely one I was intrigued by, and I did have this on my physical TBR as well. And in this one we're following Aidan Valentine, who is a radio show host, and he actually hosts a show kind of giving advice for love life and things like that. But he's actually fallen out of love with love and is kind of struggling with his job at the moment and wondering if it's something he wants to still do. One day he gets a call from a little girl ringing in for her mother, as her mother, from the little girl's perspective, has been struggling and she wants her to be happy. She wants her to find someone. Her mother's name is Lucy, and she ends up coming on the phone and speaking with Aidan, and they end up allying together to try and find her a date and to try and find her love. And the story goes from there. You can probably guess where the story does go, but I end up really loving this one. It's kind of your perfect rom-com setup within here. Definitely gave that kind of nostalgic 2000s rom-com vibes for me. It's set in Baltimore, so it's not technically a small town romance, but it definitely had that feel, almost like that cozy found family element in there with Lucy and her co-workers, as well as Aidan and his co-workers as well. And yeah, I just think this was a really solid romance. If you like rom-coms, you're definitely going to like this one. There was a bit of a nonsensical third act issue, but it was resolved pretty quickly, so it didn't annoy me too much. But I know that there is another book coming out within this series, and it's following one of the characters that we met here, so I'll be really excited to pick that one up, because this was just a bit of a breath of fresh air. The radio station element of it gave it quite a unique spin, and yeah, BK Borison's writing is pretty good, really engaging, and I really like her character work as well. I usually really enjoy her characters, so if you like contemporary romance, I think you will like this one, and I end up rating this one 4.25 stars. Next up was probably my favourite read of the month. I absolutely loved this, and it was Paladins Grace by T. Kingfisher. And if you're looking for a romantasy that's a bit different, is going to be not kind of your typical storytelling, definitely look into this series. I've read from T. Kingfisher before, but with T. Kingfisher you don't really know if you're going to love one of her books if you've read another one, because she writes such a plethora of genres. It's very genre bending when you read her stories, so you don't necessarily know if you're going to love one of her works if you've read another one. So I have read a few of hers, but I was still apprehensive going into this one because I didn't know if it was going to be for me. But I'm very happy to report that it definitely was. It was a 5-star. I'm just going to kind of spoiler alert, it was a 5-star read for me. But in this one we're following Grace, who is a perfumer who has been kind of running away from a very troubled past, and one night she's actually being pursued by these ruffians within this town and ends up getting saved by this paladin who is kind of her knight in shining armour, shall we say. And the way that it's explained on the blurb is that they must pretend to be doing something very unrespectable in an alleyway, and it's one of the funniest meet cutes that I've read. Really enjoyed that. And the paladin is actually Stephen, and essentially he is a paladin, which is kind of like a knight, but they're more of a kind of religious faction. The problem for him is that his god god has actually been lost, so he's kind of unsure of what to do with himself, and him and his other paladins within his faction are all kind of suffering from this. But when he meets Grace, it gives him a little bit of purpose, and he basically just wants to protect her. And within this, there is a bit of a mystery going on within the background of the story, and they kind of work together to try and solve that. And it was just the coziest, most whimsical, really heartwarming story. It was, I think I keep describing it as delightful. That's exactly how I felt reading it. I giggled my way through this one. It was really funny as well, and yeah, it was just a bit of a breath of fresh air when it comes to romantasy with those kind of dark and brooding characters that we have, which, look, I love, I do like that setup. We have kind of a happy-go-lucky female character with a dark and brooding MMC. The reason it's a trope is because people enjoy it, but this was so different. I mean, our paladin is actually, one of his hobbies is knitting socks, so he's definitely not that type of man, but it was just so cute. It was really refreshing, really whimsical, but definitely had a dark kind of horror undercurrent in there. If you've read from T. Kingfisher before, you probably will expect that, but it definitely had that whimsical side of it as well. And I've actually got the second book of this one on my TBR this month as well, because I absolutely loved this. It had beautiful prose as always, and yeah, 5-star, favourite read of the month. Cannot recommend this enough. Next up, I read Anxious People by Fredrik Backman, and Fredrik Backman is fast becoming a favourite author for me. I really loved Beartown by him, also loved A Man Called Ove, and this was the next on my TBR to read from him, and I think it's just solidified how much I love his writing. And it's really strange because when I tell you the premise of this story, you might not be intrigued, but I promise you it is a lot more than what the blurb kind of tells you. But essentially in this one, we're following a bank robber gone wrong, and essentially this scenario ends up with this bank robber having a load of hostages, and we're really just following the characters who have been taken hostage, kind of going through their lives, trying to understand what they're going through at that time. And I think the thing with Fredrik Backman in his writing is that he's just such a great character study. He seems to really understand humans and how we interact with each other, kind of human needs, human behaviour, and somehow he has a great way of having a huge cast of characters. I think in this we're following like maybe 10 people or something like that, but you feel really connected to each and every one of them. You feel like you can relate to them in some way. And yeah, I just really loved this one as well. It wasn't quite as high up there as Beartown for me, but it was definitely a really good read. I really enjoyed the story. It was a little bit more meandering, I would say, in terms of the plot, because obviously there's quite a small amount of plot that he could work with this one, and it was much more of a character study, but I think he done it just really well, and yeah, basically solidified him as one of my new favourite authors. And I'm actually currently reading his new release, My Friend, so that kind of tells you how much I'm enjoying his work. But yeah, I think this is another one if you really love a character driven story, one where there's not too much plot going on, but you can kind of keep occupied with the character development and kind of just really following these characters along. I think you'll really like not only this book, but also all of his works are pretty much like that. So ended up reading this one 4.25, really enjoyed it, and yeah, definitely solidified him as one of my new favourite authors. Next up, I read the arc for Broken Souls and Bones by LJ Andrews, and she is the author of kind of The Ever King and also kind of prequel series to that as well. And I've read most of those, really enjoyed them, and she's definitely a really solid romantasy author. So if you do like romantasy and you want to support indie authors as well, this one may be getting traditionally published, I'm not too sure, but a lot of her work has been indie in the past. Definitely check out her work. She's definitely a solid 4-star author for me when it comes to romantasy. I don't think I've rated any of her books lower than that, maybe a 3.5, but nothing kind of has been really disappointing that I've read from her. So I was definitely really excited to pick this one up, and this one, as with most of her story, is Norse inspired. We're following a character, Lyra, who had intended to follow a very quiet life. She didn't want to kind of do too much and was just kind of laying low within this village until one day the silent guard for the prince invades her town and takes her and some of her family away, basically accusing them of having forbidden magic within this land. And the story kind of goes from there, but what I did like about this one was it was different in the sense that the MMC does have a disability. He's not able to speak, so he does use a lot of sign language, so I really like the representation of that in there. Even though he was our kind of usual brooding, dark and fierce MMC, I really liked that there was that vulnerability with him and that the disability representation was in there. There was a lot of mystery in this one in terms of hidden identities and things like that, but I will say that it was a little bit predictable for me, and I probably just have read too many of these types of romantasies where I can see it coming. But even though it was predictable, I do think that it was really satisfying in the way that it was done, and I will be excited to read the next book within this series. But I just think that overall, if you like romantasy, if you're looking for a really solid romantasy read, anything by LJ Andrews is really good, and as this is her new book out, you might want to pick this one up, especially if you like anything that's kind of Norse/Viking inspired, much more character driven. There usually isn't too much kind of political machinations within there, usually enough to keep you occupied, but it's very much more driven by the romance and the characters. But yeah, as I say, she's usually pretty much a solid 4-star author for me, and this was no different. So I ended up rating this one 4 stars as well. Next up, I read The Favourites by Lane Fargo, and this one is one that I've seen exploding everywhere, especially earlier in the year when it first came out. So I did go into it with really high expectations, and basically a lot of people had said if you like Daisy Jones and the Six or anything like that, you'd probably really enjoy this one. We're basically following two characters who from a very young age have been figure skating together. Their names are Katarina and Heath, so obviously you've got that Wuthering Heights reference within there. And essentially what I've been told about this story was that we were just following their relationship as those years went on, as they ended up going into the Olympics and training for that, and I was told it was going to be really toxic and just so much going on within it, and I do think there were elements of that, but I think because of my expectations I found some of the narrative and some of the story a little bit lacking, and it didn't quite hit what I thought it was going to going into this one. One of the main things I did like about this story was the structure. We get kind of a mix of normal kind of narrative going through the story from the character's POV, but then we do get these snippets of kind of a interview that's being done for a documentary about them in the future. So we're getting snippets from all of the other characters that were maybe there at that time, giving us their perspective on events that happened, and then usually we would go into the narrative of what actually happened around those events. And I think through that we did get that glimpse into kind of the figure skating kind of Olympic world as well, and I find that really fascinating and definitely a new unique twist for me. And I definitely think if you did like Daisy Jones and the Six in terms of the structure, that this would definitely work for you as well. And I think where this one fell short for me the most was the romance. As I say, it was kind of hailed as being really toxic and addictive and kind of like nothing you've read before, but for me personally, although there were moments of toxicity, I don't think it was anything outside of the realms of quite a few contemporary romance that I've read. You know, if they were just a plain sailing couple, there wouldn't be much of a story there, but I don't think the toxicity that I was expecting was quite in there, so it just made it not as interesting for me, as it really was just kind of following a normal romance narrative. And then the second thing I think that fell short was the pacing. There was quite a lot in here that was told to us rather than shown, and for me that meant I wasn't as connected to the characters as I would have liked to be. Some parts of the story were told to us really quickly, you know, this is what happened over the past 4 weeks, and then other parts we lingered in which didn't really make sense. I kind of wish we'd had more time in the previous events rather than kind of the event that we're exploring at that time. So just felt very uneven, meant I wasn't as connected to the characters as I would like, and took me out of the story a little bit because of that. But I do think overall this was really well written. I would definitely read from this author again, as at times it was genuinely addictive, and even though I'm disappointed it wasn't quite the 5-star I was expecting, it was still a really solid read. But I ended up rating this one 3.5. Definitely do recommend it if you like contemporary fiction. I do think it had that unique spin on it because of the kind of figure skating and the structure of it. But yeah, unfortunately not 5-star for me, but I know a lot of people who have rated it 5-star, so that might just be a personal thing. So May really was the month of continuing series that I'm in the middle of, and the next book that I read was The Kingdom of Copper by S.A. Chakraborty. But I read this with my friend Clara, and I'm really glad that we've decided to pick this series up together because I've been loving it. I did reread City of Brass, and technically the first 40% of this one was a reread as well, because I had read it a few years ago and softy and F'd this one at the time and just never really picked it back up. But I'm really glad I picked this series up again because I'm absolutely loving it. And if you don't know, this is part of the Daevabad trilogy, so this is the second book in the trilogy, and the first book is City of Brass, where we have Nari, who at the start of the story is a bit of a mischievous thief within Cairo in the 1800s, and one day during one of her ploys she ends up inadvertently summoning this djinn called Dara, who is an age-old warrior from this different land. They essentially start off on this quest to return to the missing land of Daevabad, and the story goes from there. Nari is pulled into this kind of political world and she ends up being at the centre of it inadvertently, and the story goes from there. I don't want to give you too many details on that, but again, this is kind of rich with Persian mythology. It's really immersive in terms of the world building, and I really love this second book as well. I do think that there were times that this was a little bit slow, and I can't see why I soft DNF'd it the first time I read it, because for the first 40% there is a lot more of the world building and expansion, and it does feel a little bit slow. It feels like we're covering some ground that we already covered, but when you get later into the book you can kind of see why we've done that and why we've revisited some of those and expanded on those. But yeah, I just really love following these characters again within this, and what I love about this series is I cannot tell where it's going to go. I cannot tell how the relationships are going to go, who's going to be loyal to who can we trust. Everyone in this is kind of morally grey. They all are out for themselves, not necessarily in a selfish way or in a bad way, but it just means that we can't guess their full intentions or where they're going to go. So it's been really, really enthralling because of that, and I just think the writing style in here is amazing. I'm really loving her writing style. I'm just genuinely so happy that we decided to pick this series up. We were planning to pick up the third book this month, but we think we're going to defer it to July, so I probably will be waiting until July to read the third book in this one, but the way that this one ends made me want to pick up the next book straight away. But yeah, really loving this one. As I say, there were a few slow moments, so I ended up rating this book 4.25 overall, but in terms of the series I'm just really loving it, so can't wait to continue and see where the story takes us. And then the last book I read in May is The Ragpicker King by Cassandra Clare, and this is the second in her, what is this series called? I can't remember what the series is called. I think it's something of Castellane. Anyway, this is the second book in kind of the Swordcatcher series, and for me, Cassandra Clare can do no wrong. I've absolutely loved everything that I've read from her, and really glad to have kind of finished this series now. In terms of the books that are out, there is going to be another book coming out in this. I'm not sure how long it is in terms of the series. She's known for her long series. I think this may be a trilogy, but yeah, I'm up to date in the series now anyway. And for me, this series is just everything I love about fantasy. It's got found family, it's got political intrigue, it's got romance in there. I would say that the romance is definitely a subplot. You get crumbs of it, but if you know Cassandra Clare, you know that she's the queen of writing yearning and angst, star-crossed lovers that just can't be together for a certain reason, and she definitely delivers on that in this one. And as always with Cassandra Clare and kind of fantasy in general, the last 100 pages of this were absolute chaos, so cannot guess where this series is going to go now. And I think another thing, just similar to the Daevabad trilogy, is I couldn't really guess where this was going the whole way through, so it's definitely not predictable for me personally. And if you were a lover of the Shadowhunter series or anything like that, I definitely think you'll enjoy this. It's definitely a completely different vibe to it, but if you enjoyed the series and you enjoyed the writing, the characters that she builds, I think you'll definitely enjoy this one as well. So great way to end the month. Ended up rating this one 4.5, and yeah, again, cannot wait to continue this series. And then just to touch on the book that I ended up soft DNFing, it was The Scholar and the Last Fairy Door by H.G. Parry. I didn't get too far into this. I think I got around 25% or something like that, and there was absolutely nothing wrong with it. It's just I wasn't feeling it at the time, and I feel like I'm going to enjoy it, so I didn't want to continue and kind of give it a lesser rating or not enjoy it as much as because I wasn't in the mood. So I did attempt it, so I am counting it as kind of a tick in the box for June's reading, but I think I'm going to revisit this probably September, October time. I think would be a perfect time to read this one. So yeah, it didn't have too many thoughts. I don't want to give my thoughts on it now because I did only get 25% in and I wasn't in the mood for it, but just to kind of mention it because I know it wasn't my TBR, but I will be deferring it probably to later this year. So that's it. That's everything. That's all the books I read in May. As I say, I feel like I had a really good reading month. I'm really happy with all the reads I ended up getting to. Overall, it was a great month in terms of quality of the books that I read, and probably my top in terms of quantity as well. Not that that's important, but just when I was looking at the numbers, I was quite surprised at how many I did end up reading. So yeah, let me know if you've read any of these. Let me know your thoughts and feelings. If you enjoyed them, if you didn't, definitely tell me all your thoughts and feelings in the comments below. And let me know what your favourite book in May was and if you would recommend it. My TBR is never ending, but I'm always up for new recommendations. So again, put that in the comments below. And if you don't have anything to comment, just put any of the book emojis to let me know that you got to the end. If you like this video, do remember to give it a like. And if you want to see more from me, remember to subscribe. I post 2 videos per week and it's videos like this. So wrap-ups, TBR jars, book shopping, all good bookish things like that. Other than that, thanks so much for watching this one. I hope you enjoyed it and I'll see you in the next one soon. Bye!